My film's called Death's Peak. It's a 9-minute stop motion animation. It's about a man who digs up his dead brother's body so they can chase their childhood dream of going down a mountain on their red wagon. So the film has two connections. The first is as a kid, I launched off a cliff on a red wagon, trying to beat my brother's record speed down the driveway. But then I connected that with the feelings I had after my stepbrother committed suicide. So he was born 3 months before me, but I'm now 9 years older than him. And I found that after his death, the more depressed I got, the more I started to understand him. And I also felt like he was the one person I could talk to about my depression and my darker thoughts, and I knew he wouldn't judge me. So it's a film about a man who's struggling with those same feelings and uses the dead body to get them off his chest. Animation tends to have a really safe quality to it. Like, people go into animated films with a sense of safety and security, but I made this film for myself at my lowest. So I wanted to create a film that was a release of emotion that gives the audience that space to feel and release their own emotion, but that portrayed it in the softest, most secure way possible. So animation drops the audience's guard and lets the subject matter not be as devastating as it potentially would be in live action. So I worked with a brilliant screenwriter, and together we tried to write the story, but after some time, my screenwriter, Tracy Murray, and I realized that the words had to come from myself. So I spent time journaling and just constantly writing about my emotions that I used to feel, and then she edited it down to a script. And then making it into a stop motion is the painful part. We have to make everything. So the brilliant model makers at NFTS made the puppet, the wagon, and both puppets. And then we had a team that constructed a mountain landscape, and every single shot we had to reconstruct a new landscape out of the parts. The biggest challenge is probably the scale of it, that the landscapes are large, and I wanted that feeling of climbing something that's steep and enormous, but we only had one puppet, so we could only shoot on one stage at a time. And it just made it so that we were constantly creating just enough for every shot. There's the emotional challenge of dealing with a heavy subject that's so close to your heart, but I had an amazing team that was there for me emotionally. It was great most of the time, as it is. No, I had a really close relationship with my cinematographer, Jono Grease. My producer just mispronounced his last name, and now I can't remember. But my cinematographer, Jono, would come in, light the shots. I had my production designer, Claudia Morales, come, and together we would set dress and construct the next set as he's lighting the one we're currently shooting on. and then I would be just animating as much as possible. Luckily, I had a great editor who kept the post team connected while I kind of struggled through animating. And if I had moments that the themes of the film got me down, she kept them integrated. My best collaboration was probably with my composer, that he and I instantly connected, and it's a film that takes place in America, but I made it in England. So to have somebody from England using traditional, like, bluegrass instrumentation in a way that fits the story and hits more like a traditional score was a fun challenge that he just did a great job with. I'm naturally, or like, my past is in animation, that I really care about putting a character on screen that feels like an individual instead of just a what instead of a symbol of the emotions that they're going through. And with stop motion animation, because you're doing it one frame at a time, slowly moving the character, that's a big challenge to make something that is so specific that an audience can connect with. So throughout it, we had to make sure that beyond the animation, it still felt like an individual. So in screenwriting, it was, how can we make this person specific and believable so that it wasn't a symbolic story, but a very specific personal one. I learned, I came in with stop motion technique, but very little tradition, like very little knowledge in storytelling. So it was really, really the first time I tried to tell something personal. My favorite part was directing myself, that being able to choose the movements of the puppet and having that freedom allowed me to just completely go off script and find moments that hit the subject matter and made the character come to life in new ways. And I wouldn't have to check in with anybody. I could just accept any wild idea that came into my head. I think animation in general is a control freak's playground. Like, you get to make everything, and you can make it exactly how you want if you have the talent. Uh, but because of that, I think I'm always searching for freedom, for something that's out of my hands. So for the film, we didn't do any reference videos. All the animation is just my and the other animators that worked with me's raw connection with the puppet. And with that, instead of chasing a specific acting, you know where the puppet should go and the emotions of the scene, and then you let it play out. And if the movement works, then you go with it instead of trying to hit something specific, and pretty soon the character is coming to life on its own. And in that sense, it's much closer to live action and having actors bring a new energy into the performance. So it's more spontaneous than if you do pose to pose 2D animation, or if you have 3D animation where you can change anything after the fact. But It's still highly controlled. To work your hardest till the very end. The hard part in stop motion is when you get over 300 frames into a shot, you've been working all day, and your body and your mind are exhausted, and you want to cut corners, but if you screw up badly, you're gonna have to start over from square one. So just keeping your mind active on it, and just trying your hardest till the end, and accepting the like endurance challenge of filmmaking is necessary, if, even though it's not the most fun. I don't think that stop motion itself uh, brought anything that different other than the time you spend in that space. I spent a year just purely in production, uh, moving the puppet and feeling those emotions. So it's a challenge just based off the pure time you spend in an emotion. Uh, but the comedy element of it is terrific, because I mean I can remove his head, I can make him have 5 pupils, uh, and you can be playful in ways that you can't with the human body. And you can also hit the sad moments in a new way of shifting the gravity of the space and of the world so that it feels lethargic and heavy in moments, and other times everything's light and bright just through the movements of the body. Post-production was wonderful. I had a team that really enjoyed spending time together. That my editor Claire just was always emotionally there and supportive. Uh, my my colorist Ivan was the biggest sweetheart, and we went through way too many grades, but he stayed patient with me, and with all sorts of small mistakes in the exports. Um, and then sound design and music were almost effortless. They cared so much. Charlie Seaborn, my composer, just both knew the story inside and out, and would come to me constantly. The hard part with him is saying no, because he loves writing music and he loved the story, and would just write music everywhere. For this project, Adam Elliott was probably my biggest inspiration. Uh, I had recently I recently wrote my first pass of probably the most dramatic piece of dialogue in the film, and was in a very emotional state. So I watched the premiere memoir of a snail, and his characters are so specific and the emotions feel so real that I was brought to complete tears. And it gave me a huge hope for my film that it would be able to connect with people emotionally. So the puppets, I mean, I can talk a little bit about the stop motion in general, which I will in the fabrication. So the puppets are made by the model making department at NFTS. It's a group of students that go in learning model making for film, and luckily they learn a lot about stop motion specifically. So they built my 2 puppets in the wagon. The puppets have a beautifully crafted ball and socket armature, so they have like a wire, or they have a metal skeleton within them that let me pose my character in different ways. and get very subtle movement within him. Uh, and then the big challenge of the film was I wanted it all to be made out of paper. I found that paper is this very fragile texture, and you can get such a vast array of it. And films that have limited textures almost feel more like paintings. So I wanted everything to be paper, but paper rips. So the big challenge was figuring out how to make clothes that allowed the character to move and come alive without restricting his motion. And they luckily found a paper alternative that worked. The character was designed by my partner, Fetnat Bailey. She's also an animation director. And we wanted the character to look like he was wearing the same clothes that he would have when his brother died. So you get a jacket that's way too small. You get little elements that show how much he's grown, but how he's clinging on to the past. And then the dead brother, we wanted him to be both a little scary, look like he's been in the ground for a while, but also be an element of comedy. So she did an amazing job just finding that line between cute and horror, I guess. So when you're animating, you go in and you make every single movement without looking at the screen. You just move it to where you think it goes, and then you check it, and then you fix. Otherwise, you're gonna chase something that shouldn't exist, probably. But he has full movement in all his limbs. The eyebrows are little pieces of paper stuck on with wax, so he's a little hard to animate from above, but I can make him very surprised. The pupils are just little dots of paper and extremely easy to lose. So it's easier to make him cross-eyed than actually looking in the right direction. Oh. And there you go. You lose another eye. It's constant. My budget was around 11 grand for this project. Most of that money went into paying people to come and volunteer on it. So we'd pay them a stipend to get to the school and eat, but we weren't really allowed to pay anybody. And then the project was mainly styrofoam that I carved out personally for the backgrounds. That we just covered with printer paper. So I did a lot of bin diving to get styrofoam because I didn't like the idea of purchasing it and destroying the world. But if it came from the bin, it felt a little bit more morally acceptable. And then the paint was probably the second most because it's a lot of painting. I have one about my feelings towards being a diabetic and in a system that doesn't always allow me to thrive in the ways I want, but at the same time, that system keeps me alive and protects me. So I have very contradicting emotions towards that subject. And I have another that deals with a child getting lost, killing ants, and understanding his place in the world for the first time.